Kingdom. Yo, peace and welcome to the Boom Bap Kingdom. We're here, we're super chilling, and I hope you guys are chilling too. Before we get started, I want to give a special super BBK salute to my man Rodriguez Bailey. Peace and shout out to you. I hope all is well. I see you, kid. Keep doing your thing. Peace. All right, let's get into it. My top 5 most slept on vintage samplers. Coming in at number 5, the Akai MPC 5000. Some would say this thing was a disappointment. Others would say it was a super beast. When the 5000 was released, it was met with a lot of criticism. It was intended to be the successor to the 4000, and I'm telling you, the 4000 shoes are hard to fill. But let's talk about the 5000. It came out in 2008. It could do 64 voices simultaneously on polyphony. The sample engine was 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz. The memory that it had was 64 megabytes built in. You could expand it to 192 megabytes with an EXM-E3 chip. That was a DIMM chip. The filtering on there was actually really good. It had what they called a one-state variable filter. That filter was capable of low pass, band pass, high pass, vocal formant, and analog modeling. It also did contain a synth engine. It had a type 3 oscillator. It had virtual analog synth waveforms that included your saw, square, sine, pulse, noise, and sample-based features, with also a built-in arpeggiator and 2 LFOs. So it was very, very capable in not only the sampling side, but the synth side. It included over 300 synth presets, which is pretty amazing, even for this day and time. Now let's talk about the sequencer, because we know Akai is masters of sequencing. The sequencer in the MPC 5000 featured 960 PPQN. So if you don't know what PPQN is parts or pulses per quarter note. What that does is it's directly responsible for and impacts how precise a sequencer is, how precisely it can record and play back notes, rhythm, and timing. Now let's talk about the storage of the 5000. It included an 80 gig hard drive, and it had a type 2 compact flash drive that supported up to 2 gigs storage on a CF card. This thing was loaded, and if you're running that 2.0 or even that JJOS, the 5000 is a slept on beast. Number 4 on my list is one that you guys might not know about at all, but it is the Roland SP808 that was released in 1998. The SP808 was a beast, but it had some shortcomings. So let's talk about it. It's considered a classic, a standalone sampler, sequencer, synthesizer. It had 4-track digital audio recording. It was known for its workflow. It had really dope RDAC sampling, built-in effects. The effects on the 808, we already know Roland is the king of effects. It had something that I really, really like from them that they don't do anymore, which was that D-beam controller. That thing was amazing. The storage was nervous, and that was the shortcoming, because it used zip disks. Now there was an upside to this and a downside. Zip disk was an invention by a company called Iomega. So Iomega made these disks. They were large format. I have a bunch of them because I can use zip disks on my MPC 60. They supported up to 100 megabytes of storage. So one zip disk was roughly 100 3.5 floppy disks. The SP808 issue with the zip drives, it leveraged the internal zip disk as if it were RAM. So when you had your zip disk in the SP808, it was reading from that in real time, as opposed to having a buffer in RAM for samples. So that created an issue with latency. But in terms of storage, having a 100 megabyte zip disk internal drive was ahead of its time. No other manufacturer was actually doing that. The sequencer, it gave you 4 audio tracks. You had up to 64 song support. They kind of recorded things in events, and they could record up to 2,000 phrase events per song within the sequencer. But you could also do real time and step recording. And now they had another unit called the SP808EX that came with an upgraded zip drive, which was the iOmega 250 megabyte internal. So essentially you're getting 2.5 times the storage capacity that you would on the standard SP808. The SP808 effects were legendary. You had 25 effect algorithms that included filters, delays, reverbs, isolators. They had a lo-fi filter or lo-fi effect on there. Really dope. And what was also dope about the SP808 is they included the reverbs from the RE201 Space Echo series that they were known for. Now, let's talk about number 3, because this is one of my favorites, and I almost bought one of these before the SP404 Mark II was released. So yes, this is another Roland unit, and we're talking about the SP555. So the SP555, that was released in 2008, and it had that tactile workflow. It had innovative loop capturing. It really had studio grade performance effects, and the other specs on this thing included 12 voice polyphony. Sample frequency was digital, 44.1 kilohertz. The data formats that it supported for samples were WAV and AIFF. So you could import WAV files, AIFF files. Very dope. It had 2 sampling modes. You could set it to standard, which would have gave you that 44.1 kilohertz, and you could set it to lo-fi mode. So if you notice, like around 2008, that's when people started to think about, the nostalgia of the 90s and those sonics, and Roland kind of spearheaded that with lo-fi effects. So the 555 absolutely had that. It had 37 effect types, which included, but by no means are limited to this list I'm about to rattle off. They had something called the super filter. They had voice transformers. They had multiple DJ and effects, looping effects. They had reverbs, delays, etc. And it also had that crazy D-beam, which I wish they would bring that back, because man, that D-beam was dope. It had 16 pads, typical, MPC style. You had 10 pad banks for up to 160 samples total. They had 3 encoder knobs, as well as that D-beam for controllers. The sequencer could hold up to approximately 8,000 notes. It supported a compact flash card type 1, which gave you up to 2 gigs of extra storage. It supported USB 2.0. So that meant you could connect it to a computer, use it as a mass storage device, and you could transfer files to and from it. Before the SP1200, before the MPC60, there was a company called Sequential Circuits, and these guys created a beast. Back in 1986, you had the Sequential Circuits Studio 440. Man, what a beast. I wish I could get my hands on a 440. This thing was amazing. It was created by Dave Smith. If you don't know who Dave Smith is, or who Sequential Circuits is, for that matter, they are the company that was famous for making the Prophet series synthesizers. So let's get into the specs of the 440. That sample engine, crazy for boom bap. You had 12-bit resolution with variable sample rates up to 41 kilohertz. You could take that sample engine, which was 12-bit by default, and you can dial in the frequency that you wanted. So say you wanted 12-bit at 28 kilohertz, you could do that. Or you could do 12-bit, 41 kilohertz, you could do that. That is amazing in a device that came out in 1986. However, you know, there's always a gotcha with these old joints. But the gotcha there is the base memory was only 768 kilobytes. Yo, that is so small, especially to today's standards. I mean, it's microscopic storage compared to today. Unlike many digital counterparts, it featured analog low-pass filters. Most of these machines nowadays, the filters are all digital that try to emulate analog circuitry. In those days, you didn't have that. The 440 had true analog filters. The sequencer was actually pretty dope. You had 8 tracks, 50,000 notes, and it had swing capability between 50 and 75%. You could actually tweak the swing. Studio 440 is extremely rare. They only made a little over 500 units. So if you can get one, man, that thing is the super holy grail even before the SP1200. This brings me to my number one most slept on vintage sampler, and that would be the Yamaha SU700. That thing is a beast even to today's standards. So what makes this thing so dope? Because really, I would love to own one. So if you get rid of one, holla at me, word up. The SU700 was released by Yamaha back in 1998. It featured a 64-note polyphony playback, 64 sounds playback simultaneously. It had a slightly odd sequencer. It was a 42-track sequencer. It had extensive real-time control. You know, it combined powerful phrase sampling with a built-in mixer and a ribbon controller for effects. In terms of the sound and the sample engine, it was a 16-bit linear or 8-bit linear sample engine, so you could select it. It was selectable. In terms of sample frequencies, you got 44.1, 22.05, and 11.025 kilohertz analog sample frequency and rates, plus the digital, which was 32 kilohertz and 48 kilohertz. So that's amazing. So you could do super gritty, dusty analog sound, or you could get 16-bit, 48 kilohertz, super pristine, super clean sound if you wanted out of that unit. The RAM was small by default. It rolled out with only 4 megabytes of RAM, but you could upgrade it to 68 megabytes with a 72-pin SIM, which was common in old PCs back in the days. So RAM upgrades were easily accessible. Your sample time, you had roughly 22.3 seconds at 44.1 kilohertz. What also makes that SU700 super dope is it had 3 effect engines, 3 effect processors that could run simultaneously. That is extremely dope and forward thinking and ahead of its time. It had 43 different effect types that included your filters, delays, distortion, so much more. It had EQs, 2-band, resonance, low pass, high pass, band pass filters, and you could put these filters like per track, which was very impressive for a unit from that era. This is my top 5 most slept on vintage samplers, And what kind of makes owning a vintage sampler dope is in today's world, we have so many different firmware updates and software updates being released with all these different features. It's really almost difficult to keep track of. A lot of these features people probably don't really use. I think one of the appeals to owning a vintage unit is it really just does what it was designed to do and nothing more. It's just direct to the point. You turn it on, you go to work, you turn it off when you're done. This is my top 5 vintage samplers most slept on. I would love to hear from you guys. If you have a sampler vintage that was not on this list, we're not talking about 1200, 63,000, 2,000, none of that stuff. We're talking about the stuff that's vintage that people didn't use, that got ignored. If you have one, if you use one, if you know about one that I didn't include on this list, get in those comments and let me know what you think. And with that, I'll leave you with a BBK salute. Peace.